Sarah woke up to the soft light of a Sunday morning filtering through her bedroom window, expecting the usual quiet comfort of her home in Willow Creek, Ohio. But something felt off, almost like the air itself was holding its breath. She stretched and listened, realizing the familiar sounds of breakfast sizzling in the kitchen or the faint hum of her husband David getting ready were missing, replaced by a strange, heavy silence that made her heart flutter with unease. Rising from the bed, she padded down the hallway, her bare feet pressing against the cool wooden floor, and noticed the living room was unusually still. On the couch sat her 7-year-old son, Ethan, clutching a small envelope with a seriousness that made her stop in her tracks. His eyes were wide, and there was a nervous tremble in his small voice as he said, "Mom, I think you should see this." Confused but alert, Sarah took the envelope, her fingers brushing against his, feeling the tension he hadn't been able to hide. She opened it carefully, her breath catching slightly as she read the handwritten words inside, words that were not addressed to her, but were written in a way that suggested urgency, guilt, and longing. "I've been feeling lost, and I don't know how to say this, but I'm sorry." Sarah's mind raced, trying to place the handwriting, trying to figure out who could have written something so personal, yet so haunting, until her gaze returned to Ethan's earnest eyes, shining with a mix of fear and hope. "It's from Dad," he whispered, barely audible, and the weight of the revelation pressed down on her chest, leaving her momentarily breathless. Memories she had pushed to the back of her mind began rushing forward. The late nights David had claimed were for work, the distracted glances at his phone, the sudden quietness that seemed to settle over him whenever she asked questions about his day. Sarah had chalked it up to stress, exhaustion, the normal ebbs and flows of a busy life. But now she realized her son had seen things she hadn't noticed. And somehow, in his innocence, he had understood more than she had. A wave of conflicting emotions crashed over her. Fear, confusion, sadness, and an odd flicker of relief that the secret was no longer buried, that she no longer had to wonder in silence about the cracks she had sensed but could never name. Ethan fidgeted, his small hands twisting nervously in his lap, and Sarah reached out to hold them, feeling a surge of protectiveness, a desire to shield him from the adult worries that now seemed to hang in the air between them. She knelt beside him, taking a deep breath as the quiet house pressed in around her, realizing that the calm Sunday morning she had imagined, one filled with pancakes, laughter, and the soft chatter of her family, had already shifted into something she could not have anticipated. The envelope in her hands felt heavier than paper, filled with unspoken words, hidden truths, and the fragile hope that they could somehow navigate whatever was coming together. Her heart ached, not just for herself, but for Ethan, who had carried a secret meant for adult hearts and had come to her first, trusting her to handle the storm. Sarah's mind raced with questions. What exactly had David written? What had he done while she slept? And how would this change the life she had built with him? She could feel the tension tightening around her chest, a physical manifestation of the uncertainty that now defined the room. Yet beneath the fear, there was a strange, almost electric sense of anticipation, a knowing that the events set in motion by her son's discovery were going to lead to truths that could not be ignored. And perhaps, despite the heartache looming ahead, there might be a chance to rebuild, to reconnect, to understand the love and mistakes that had shaped their family. In that quiet, heavy moment, with the soft morning light brushing against Ethan's face and the unopened questions stretching ahead like an uncertain path, Sarah realized that life as she had known it was about to change forever, and the small, courageous act of her son holding the envelope while she slept had set everything into motion, leaving her both terrified and strangely hopeful for what came next. Sarah spent the day in a haze, the note Ethan had found clutched in her hands as if it were both a lifeline and a trigger for every anxious thought she had been avoiding for months, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears she wasn't ready to name, and she found herself glancing at David whenever he entered the room, searching for a sign, a clue, anything that might explain the words that had appeared in her son's hands. Yet he carried on with the same quiet routine, unaware that their world had already shifted. She tried to focus on Ethan, who had been unusually quiet, sitting on the floor with his toys but with a distant, thoughtful expression, his small brow furrowed as if he were carrying the weight of things no child should bear, and Sarah's heart ached because she knew he had already sensed the cracks in their family, the secret tension that she had tried to ignore, the late-night phone calls, the sudden evasiveness, and the small, inexplicable sadness in David's. eyes that she had chalked up to work stress. And now it all felt real, tangible, undeniable, a hidden truth laid bare by her son's innocence and courage, and she felt a strange mix of anger, fear, and almost relief, because at least it was out in the open, and maybe they could face it together, even if the path ahead seemed impossible. She remembered the nights she had lain awake, listening to the quiet house, wondering what David was thinking, feeling, doing. And now she realized that Ethan had seen and understood things she hadn't, that children often sense more than adults give them credit for, and she felt a pang of guilt for not noticing sooner, for assuming that she could protect him from every disappointment, every heartbreak, when in truth, he was already living with it silently, courageously, and she wanted to hold him close, to reassure him, to shield him. Yet she also knew that honesty had to come first, that secrets could never truly protect anyone. Sarah spent the afternoon moving through the house in a fog, tidying up, making tea, trying to keep her composure while her mind kept replaying every moment of the past months, every unusual glance, every unspoken word. And she realized that the note hinted at something far deeper than a simple apology, something that reached into the heart of their marriage, their trust, and their future. And she wondered how much David had been carrying silently, how much he had tried to fix before anyone noticed, and what it meant for them now that Ethan had discovered it, because children often mirror the truth adults try to hide. And now the mirror had been held up, and there was no turning away. When David came home that evening, Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety mixed with determination, knowing she could no longer pretend that everything was normal, that the rhythm of their family life could continue without acknowledging the shift that had already begun. And she noticed the subtle signs of fatigue in his eyes, the way his shoulders tensed when he spoke, the faint hesitation in his voice. And she understood that he too had been carrying burdens he hadn't shared. And now, with Ethan's revelation, those burdens would have to be faced openly, because secrets, even the smallest ones, have a way of surfacing. And the courage of a child had forced their hand, leaving no room for avoidance, denial, or delay. She sat with Ethan after dinner, holding his hand as he recounted in his soft, careful way what he had found, the note, the worry he had felt, the questions he hadn't dared to ask, and Sarah felt a surge of love and protectiveness, realizing that he had acted out of care for her, for the family, and the clarity of his intentions, his innocence, and his bravery made the fear in her chest a little lighter, though still heavy with the unknown, and she whispered words of reassurance to him, promising that together they would find a way through this, that honesty would guide them, that love would not fail even when trust was fragile, because the discovery had opened a door they could not close, a door that would lead to truths, confessions, and ultimately, the chance to rebuild a stronger bond. And yet, the tension was undeniable, the questions lingering in the air, the uncertainty about David's next words, his next actions, leaving her heart pounding, a mixture of dread and cautious hope. And as night fell, Sarah realized that what Ethan had done while she was sleeping, the quiet, thoughtful courage of a child taking initiative in a moment of intuition, had shifted the foundation of their family life, forcing hidden truths to surface, igniting conversations that had long been needed, and setting them all on a path that was terrifying, uncertain, but also filled with the possibility of healing, understanding, and a deeper love. Because sometimes it takes the unfiltered perception of a child to reveal the real heart of a family. And now, with the note in her hands and the knowledge that nothing could remain hidden, Sarah understood that the life they had known had changed forever, and that the coming days would test them in ways they could not yet imagine, while also giving them the chance to grow closer, to confront their vulnerabilities, and to rebuild the trust that had quietly begun to erode, a delicate, emotional journey ignited by the small, powerful action of a son who acted out of love, concern, and hope. And in that quiet, tension-filled evening, Sarah realized that the revelation was not just a source of pain, but also the first step toward a new understanding, a deeper connection, and perhaps a more honest, resilient family. That evening, Sarah waited until Ethan was asleep, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the faint ticking of the wall clock, and she could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she clutched the note in her hands, knowing that what she was about to do could change everything. David had returned home earlier, tired from work, his usual calm routine masking the storm Sarah knew was coming, and she felt a mix of fear, anger, and desperate hope as she approached him, her voice trembling slightly when she said, "David, we need to talk." And immediately the shift in the room was palpable, the casual air replaced by tension so thick it seemed to press against her skin, making every breath deliberate and measured. And David's eyes met hers with a flicker of apprehension, sensing the seriousness of her tone, a quiet unease he hadn't felt in months. She handed him the note, her fingers brushing against his, and he took it slowly, his eyes scanning the words with a combination of recognition, guilt, and disbelief, his lips parting slightly as if to speak but catching himself. And Sarah saw the subtle tremor in his hands, the same hands that had comforted her and held Ethan countless times, now shaking with the weight of the truth they had carried silently for so long. "I didn't mean for him to find out," he whispered finally, his voice low, almost breaking. "I thought I could fix things before anyone noticed." And Sarah felt the sting of betrayal mixed with the ache of love she still carried for him. The same love that had built their life together, shared laughter, quiet moments, and family traditions, now standing fragile and uncertain before the revelation laid bare in Ethan's hands. Her chest tightened as she listened to him, the words confirming what she had feared, but also explaining the late nights, the distracted glances, the quiet moments of tension she had brushed aside as stress or fatigue, and suddenly, every memory of the past months came rushing back in vivid, painful clarity. Yet amid the heartbreak, there was a strange sense of relief that the secret was out, that the tension she had felt but could not name now had a shape, a voice, a reason, and for the first time in a long while, they could confront it together, honestly and openly. David's eyes met hers, filled with remorse and vulnerability, and Sarah realized that beneath the mistakes, beneath the hidden moments, there was still a man she loved, a father who had been human, flawed, but capable of change, capable of showing up, and capable of making amends if they were willing to take the difficult steps together. And she understood that the path ahead would not be easy, that rebuilding trust would require patience, honesty, and courage from both of them. But the first step had been taken, however painfully, by the revelation that Ethan had delivered, a reminder that sometimes children see more clearly than adults, and that their innocence can illuminate the shadows that adults hide in. The evening stretched on, filled with quiet conversation, punctuated by pauses heavy with emotion, moments where neither spoke but both felt the gravity of their shared history, the love that still lingered between them, and the fragility of the future they were about to navigate. And as Sarah listened to David explain his choices, his regrets, and his desire to repair the damage, she felt the stirrings of hope mingled with sorrow, a recognition that healing would be a journey and that every small action, every honest word, every attempt to show care would matter more than anything else. She reflected on Ethan, sleeping peacefully upstairs, unaware of the full weight of the adult emotions swirling below. Yet he had been the catalyst for this confrontation, the spark that ignited the possibility of truth and reconciliation, and she silently thanked him for his courage, knowing that it had taken more bravery than most adults could muster to hold the note, to come to her first, and to trust that she could handle the truth with love and wisdom. David reached out, his hand brushing hers in a tentative gesture, and she felt a mixture of warmth and uncertainty, a reminder that love could still exist alongside hurt, that vulnerability could open the door to connection, and that forgiveness, though fragile, was possible if nurtured with patience and sincerity. The night stretched on, a tapestry of emotion, confession, and tentative understanding, with Sarah listening, asking questions, and sharing her fears and heartbreaks, creating a space where honesty could exist without judgment, and where the foundation of their family could be strengthened rather than shattered by the revelations brought to light by their son's innocent courage. And through it all, the room seemed charged with a strange energy, a combination of fear, hope, and the raw beauty of human emotion laid bare, showing that love, even tested and wounded, could still find a way to breathe, to heal, and to grow. By the time they finally sat in silence, the weight of the evening settling like dust in the air, Sarah understood that the confrontation, though painful, had opened the door to something essential, the chance to rebuild trust, to communicate openly, and to create a family life that was stronger for the honesty and courage it now contained. And as she looked at David, seeing his remorse, his humanity, and his willingness to face the consequences of his actions, she realized that what Ethan had done while she was sleeping, the quiet, fearless act of a child noticing truth and sharing it, had forced a reckoning that neither of them could avoid, had shifted the trajectory of their marriage, and had given them a raw, unfiltered opportunity to confront their vulnerabilities, to express love alongside hurt, and to lay the groundwork for a future where mistakes could be acknowledged, lessons learned, and hearts mended. Because sometimes the smallest actions reveal the deepest truths, and the courage of one child had created a turning point in the life of their family, leaving Sarah both terrified and strangely hopeful, knowing that the journey ahead would be hard, but also filled with the possibility of healing, love, and the restoration of trust that had once seemed fragile. Yet now, after this confrontation, felt like a fragile but shining thread ready to be woven into a stronger bond. In the weeks that followed, Sarah, David, and Ethan began navigating the fragile path of rebuilding their family, each day a delicate balance of honesty, patience, and cautious hope as Sarah watched David make small but meaningful gestures, coming home earlier, putting his phone aside, asking about her day, listening carefully when she spoke, and she felt a glimmer of the love that had first drawn her to him, tempered now by the awareness that trust, once shaken, needed to be earned moment by moment. And Ethan, perceptive and resilient beyond his years, seemed to sense the change as well, offering small smiles, tentative hugs, and quiet reassurance that gave them both courage, reminding Sarah that their son had been the catalyst for the healing that was slowly taking shape. And she marveled at how a child's innocence and insight could illuminate the cracks adults often ignore, making them face truths that were uncomfortable yet necessary. And each morning, she woke to the soft laughter of Ethan playing quietly, the scent of breakfast cooking, and the gentle presence of David sitting nearby, reading the paper or sipping coffee. And she felt a deep, almost overwhelming gratitude that life had not fallen apart, that they were learning to communicate with openness and empathy, to acknowledge mistakes without judgment, and to show love through both words and actions. And yet, the journey was not without its challenges, for moments of doubt and fear still lingered. Unexpected pangs of hurt would appear when memories of the past surfaced, and Sarah found herself questioning whether they could truly move forward without the shadow of what had been revealed always lingering. But she reminded herself that healing was not linear, that the courage they had shown, the honesty David had begun to embrace, and the steadfast support of Ethan created a foundation stronger than secrecy or denial ever could. And slowly, the house that had felt heavy with silence and tension was beginning to hum with life again. The rooms filled with conversation, laughter, and the quiet comfort of shared meals. And Sarah realized that the note Ethan had discovered, which at first had felt like a wedge between them, had become a symbol of truth and the beginning of a new chapter, because it forced conversations, honesty, and vulnerability that would otherwise have been avoided. And through those difficult moments, their love was being tested and strengthened in ways they had never imagined, as David made deliberate choices to show care and attention, apologizing when necessary, and listening when she expressed her fears. And Sarah, in turn, allowed herself to feel both the heartbreak and the hope, embracing the complexity of emotions that came with forgiveness and the rekindling of intimacy in its quiet, tender forms. And as the days turned into weeks, she noticed subtle changes in him, the way his eyes lingered on her when she entered the room, the small gestures of thoughtfulness, the quiet reassurance that he was committed not just to repairing his mistakes, but to being fully present in their family life. And these moments, though simple, carried immense weight, proving that love could be resilient when nurtured with intention and honesty. And Sarah felt a warmth in her chest as she observed Ethan playing, seeing the trust slowly returning to his face, the way he ran to David for hugs without hesitation, and the way David responded with patience, affection, and attention, showing that even after disappointment, connections could be restored and hearts could be mended. And one afternoon, as they walked together in the park, hand in hand, sunlight dancing on the trees, Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months, a quiet understanding that while life had been changed by the revelation, it had also opened the door to a deeper, more authentic love. And she glanced at David, seeing vulnerability, regret, and determination reflected in his eyes, and she knew that their relationship, though scarred, was capable of growth, capable of enduring, and capable of a love more honest than before. Because sometimes it takes facing the harshest truths to realize what is truly important. And as Ethan skipped ahead, laughter spilling into the air, Sarah felt a swell of pride and hope, knowing that their son's courage had not only revealed the truth, but had also inspired healing, and that the family, though tested, was finding its rhythm again, learning to value communication, presence, and the quiet power of forgiveness. And in that moment, with the wind brushing through the trees and the warmth of the day around them, Sarah whispered to herself, softly but with certainty, "What my son did while I was sleeping truly changed my life forever," because it had forced them all to face reality, to confront mistakes, to nurture honesty, and to embrace the love and trust that had always been there beneath the surface, waiting to be restored. And as she held David's hand and looked at Ethan, she realized that life could be painful, beautiful, and hopeful all at once, that even after heartbreak, hearts could heal, and that the courage of a child had created an opportunity for a family to rediscover love, connection, and the power of resilience, leaving her with a deep, abiding sense that the future, though uncertain, was full of promise, tenderness, and the quiet magic of a family choosing to grow stronger together after facing the truths that once threatened to tear them apart.